So in my latest video covering this topic, I went over all of the SSR hunters in Solo Leveling Arise, and I went over all of their best gear sets for each individual character. Whereas this time, I'm going to be going over all of their best weapons, and I do know, of course, all of their exclusive weapons are going to be their best weapons. However, not everyone can do that. So I'm going to be going over what all of their best SR, as well as also R weapons are going to be as well, depending on if the R weapons are actually better than SR weapons, which is just never really going to be the case because the SR weapons are just better versions of the R weapons, basically. So first things up, we have Lior, of course, and because she's a HP damage scaler, as you can see from these skills right here, we're going to want a weapon just like her regular weapon, Unparalleled Bravery, to be able to increase that HP main stat. So when it comes to weapons that are going to increase our main stat in HP, we have two options. The first one being the Ancient Grimoire, which basically increases your power gauge acquisition rate by 12%, really good, and then this can go all the way up to 32%. And then we have the Steel Staff, which basically says whenever you use your QT skill or Quick Time Event skill, you will just charge your power gauge or your ultimate gauge by a flat 4.5%, which can go all the way up to 12%. So straight up, I think the Ancient Grimoire is going to be the better one out of the two, as Lior is a character that likes to be on the battlefield for quite a long time, whereas if you use the Steel Staff, then because you've got to proc your Quick Time Event skill, it means you've got to be on and off the field quite a lot, so this is normally used for like a much more supporting character, which is why I think this one is by far going to be her best SR weapon. And because she also spams her skills as well, it means you're going to be able to get your ultimate really fast. Emma Lawrence is up next, and she is a very similar condition because she is also a HP scaler as well. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't had too much experience with Emma Lawrence, but I do feel like from what I've read from her kit so far, I think the Ancient Grimoire is also going to be the best option for her, as I feel like when you're using Emma, you want to be able to stay on the battlefield for as long as possible so you can deal as much break damage as you can, which is why the Ancient Grimoire, in my opinion, will probably be the better SR weapon for her, and that's pretty much it. Lior is up next, and she is a attack scaler, so that means we've got a lot more weapons to look through. So when it comes to attack scaling weapons, I believe we have three options. The first one being the Steel Dagger, which increases your basic attack damage by 6% all the way up to 16%, and then we have the Steel Bow, which increases your crit damage by 9%, which goes up all the way to 24%, and then we have the Steel Longsword, which increases weakness attribute damage by 4.5%, sorry, all the way up to 12% as well. And because on one of Lior's basic skills, you can basically increase your own dark elemental damage by 10% for team members standing inside of the circle. I do think the Steel Longsword can be a really good weapon for her, as you'll be able to deal even more dark damage with the weakness attribute damage increase from this weapon as well, so that'll be always really good. But if you're not fighting against enemies that are weak to dark damage, then the Steel Bow will definitely be the next best thing, as because I don't really think you don't really care too much about using her basic attacks, so I feel like the Steel Bow is going to be probably the best overall choice, as you can never really go wrong with a 24% increase in crit damage. So yeah, I think this one is fantastic and will definitely be the best in slot for most stages that you're going to use her in. But if you're facing it off against an enemy that is potentially weak to dark damage, I think this weapon could be even better. Hwang Dongsu, and unfortunately, yeah, he is a defense scaler, and I can't help but feel just in this game in general, defense scalers have been absolutely shafted, unfortunately. So yeah, there isn't really many choices for him, as you do have the Steel Axe, which will increase your core attack damage by 9% all the way up to 24%, and obviously this is one of the defense scaling weapons. And then you've also got the Steel Shield, which is the final defense scaling weapon, which decreases the damage you take from boss monsters by 4.5%, which goes up all the way to 12%. So yeah, you really don't have any options, especially because Dongsu is a character that wants to be spamming, I believe it's this skill right here, Urge to Kill, so you really just don't have anything too good. The only thing I will say is basically on his passive, but it says when Greed Scavenger, Steel Blow, or S-Rank Influence are used after being hit, you'll then apply the Impulse effect, which will increase your defense by a certain amount, by 3% and up to 5 times. So I think the Steel Shield could possibly be really decent, because what you can do with it is you can just utilize the boss damage reduction that you take, so you can take all of your damage stacks to get all of your defense up, so then you can do a lot more damage with your defense increases from his passive. And then we have Min Byung-gu up next, and Min Byung-gu is another HP scaler, so I think you know what that means. It means we've got to choose between either the Ancient Grimoire or the Steel Staff. And overall, I do think the Steel Staff is actually going to be better, because as I mentioned before, I feel like this weapon is really good for characters that do not spend a lot of time on the field, and that's basically what Min Byung-gu does. As essentially what you do with him is, if you have your ult not, or it doesn't really matter if you do or don't. But basically, what you want to do with Min Byung-gu is use Conviction of Light to increase the amount of damage enemies will take by a certain percentage. And then if you have your ult, you use your ult, and then that'll proc the QTE skill of another character, and then you can just swap out once you've got all of the damage increases on not only yourselves, but also your enemies as well. And then also you can do a bit of healing as well if you need to. So I think because of that, I think the Steel Staff is going to be his best in-slot weapon for an SR weapon anyways. As I mentioned before, obviously, he doesn't really spend that much time on the battlefield. Woo Jinchul is up next, and he is another defense scaler that also wants to be able to spam his basic skill, Mediation of Power, as well as his Iron Fist skill as well. So I think because Jinchul is normally based around being like sort of an evasion tank instead of being a tank that just takes a lot of damage, I think the Steel Axe is going to be probably his best weapon for him, as you can increase your core damage by core attack damage by 24%. And the reason why I'm going for this is because pretty much once you have his third dupe, whenever you use a dash or extreme evasion, you'll decrease the cooldown of Mediation of Power and Iron Fist by 2 seconds, and then you'll instantly get your core attack. Which means once you get up to a certain point in his dupes, you can really utilize his core attacks a lot. But I think even without those dupes, you can anyways, because his core attacks do break damage as well. So being able to increase that damage as well will always be useful, because you want to be able to do as much break damage as possible with him, so you're going to want to be using your core attacks on him. So I think it's worth increasing that damage as opposed to reducing the damage that you take yourself, as essentially all he's about is using dashes and extreme evasion and stuff to not take damage, instead of just being a very, very tanky character instead. And then we have Choy Jong in. Obviously you can get equivalent exchange for free, so if you've already got that, then there's no really need for you to think about anything else. And to be honest, on him there's even less options, as he's a character that can't crit. So the steel bow is just a no-go. You can't really use this weapon on him at all. So we're left with either the steel dagger or the steel longsword. And yeah, honestly, probably it's just going to be the steel longsword, because hopefully you'll just bring him in the loader stages where enemies are weak to fire damage. So most of the time, hopefully this will be your best bet. But again, if you're not facing off against a stage that's weak to fire enemies, then I guess you can utilize this a little bit, but it's not really that valuable either way, as you really want to just be resetting the cooldown of his skills, Rain of Flames and Flame Spear, which are these two right here. So I feel like you're not really doing too many basic attacks on him, so it's whatever. I mean, I haven't really played him too much apart from the trial that they gave you for him, so I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the Steel Sword is going to be the best weapon for him as a SR weapon anyways. And then we have Lim Tae-gyu. Lim Tae-gyu is an attack scaler again, so we've got a choice of 3 weapons this time, and he can actually crit. And overall, straight away, I think the Steel Dagger or the Steel Bow are going to be the best weapons for him. It depends on what you currently want, because Lim Tae-gyu's whole kit is about enhancing his basic attacks as well as spamming a lot of core attacks as well, which is why the Steel Dagger or whatever it was called is going to be probably the best in-slot weapon for him, as you're going to be using a lot of basic attacks on him as well. And if you can have a high amount of uptime on his ultimate, you'll be doing that even more. So yeah, I think that weapon is going to be the perfect weapon for him. But if you've got a build of Lim Tae-gyu that has a lot of crit stats on him, then this weapon, the Steel Bow, is also going to be a fantastic weapon for him. You really can't go wrong with either of these weapons. They are both fantastic. And then the very final character we have is Baek Yoonho, and unfortunately, again, we have another defense scaler. So yeah, we're going to have to try and see what the best weapon is going to be for him. So again, just like Jinchul, I do think the Steel Axe is going to be the best for him, as because he's also a tank. He also does then also have break damage on his core attack, and also his core attack is also somewhat more useful in his kit, as it also procs the White Flames effect, which is all really nice, as it only applies it to, well, it applies this debuff with all of his skills apart from his basic attacks. So that means you can apply with your core attack, so whilst you're also breaking the enemy's like break meter, you can also apply this to do a bunch of extra damage as well, which is definitely going to make this a lot more useful. But you still can utilize the actual Steel Shield as well, because unlike Jinchul, Baek Yoonho is not really that much of an evasion tank. So if you need to have a bit of extra survivability, this one is also decent. But overall, I would probably say the Steel Axe is a bit better, because, well, you can also get it for free, so that's always really good, and you can get more damage out of it as well. So there you have it. That is all of the best weapons, well, the best, I guess, free-to-play weapons for every SSR character hunter in Solo Leveling Arise. And when it comes to the R weapons, they are literally just miniature versions of these weapons in terms of their effects, so there's not really much point ever looking at the R weapons. The only time you'd ever want to use R weapons, I guess, if you have like a max amount of dupes for one of them, and then or you just don't have the SR weapons, or you just don't have any dupes for any of these SR weapons, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. If you found this video useful or helpful or just entertaining in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace!